Hello everyone, welcome back to another podcast. Today we spoke to
Chris Cheetham.
Chris Cheetham. So yeah, this is just someone that we met through Instagram after we started Front, or whilst we work on Front. And yeah, what an interesting guy. Very, very interesting, very talented, very knowledgeable.
I think basically if you're, someone who wants to be a professional photographer, it's definitely one worth listening to, because he just talks about how he got into, basically that's what he does, that's what he's always done. He talks about how he got into it, different things that he's done with that. So yeah, it's
strictly based around film photography as well. Like he's been around for 40 years taking professional photos all around the world, in different areas. And yeah, you'll see his work throughout the podcast itself.
But he's shot all around the world, sold prints at Sotheby's. It was like ad photographer for an ad, various different advertising agencies, I guess, throughout the 90s, pretty much.
Has his own studio, produces all his own work.
And still doing it today. So yeah, really.
When you say, or when you look at a picture and you go, that looks vintage, or I want the vintage look. This guy was doing vintage photos before they were vintage. That's fair to say, right? They're that good.
Yeah. They are classic, like timeless looking things, I'd say.
Yeah. So yeah,
cool.
Enjoy the episode. Nice. Tell us then, Chris, how did you get into the world of photography? How did you start owning your skills, so to speak?
Yeah, I started off, quite a similar way to a lot of other photographers. I got given a small twin lens reflex camera, a plastic one, when I was about 10, 12 years old. And it just fascinated me from the very beginning, just taking photographs with it. They were all processed at, chemists and that sort of thing. And then I got more interested thinking, I'd like to process the film myself and print it. And I was quite lucky because some people gave me some equipment, some enlargers and tanks and bits and pieces. And I just sort of started really. And from that sort of point onwards, I sort of knew that that's what I wanted to do, which I think is very lucky. I think I was very, very lucky because I sort of knew from that early age, that's what I really wanted to do. And then I got a better camera. I got more experience in the darkroom and that sort of thing. And I just sort of pressed on. And I was pretty hopeless at school. I wasn't bright at all. And I then went to art school. And I did a bit of foundation art. I was never going to be a painter, that's for sure. And then I did a 3-year photographic course, and I passed all that. And then I left and started off as a black and white printer. I did that for a few years, and then I moved on. And basically from the north of England where I lived, I sort of knew that I had to sort of move somewhere where, I could work at a different level, really. And so eventually, through various trips going further south, I ended up in London. And then I started off as an advertising photographer. Basically, I needed the money, really. I had to earn a living. And all the time, I was always doing my own work, my own personal work, landscapes, people, all sorts of things. But the advertising at that time was I was paid very well, and I really enjoyed it. And I worked with some really, really top people, and that lasted for quite a long time. And then eventually I sort of made the change from commercial photography. I just decided to go much more into the work that I really wanted to do. And as a family, because I had quite young children at that point, we all moved abroad for a period, and we lived in Spain for a while, and that gave me the opportunity to do a lot more of my own work. And I built a dart room over there. I think you'll have some of the photographs of the dart room. I mean, it's all gelatine silver, my work, and it's all with the huge enlargers and all the dishes and everything else, which is something I just love. I just get absorbed into it and work that way.
Well, it seems crazy because what you were doing 20, 30 years ago is now what everyone seems to want to do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, it's incredible. You know, people often say, you know, oh God, you know, you're working with that sort of 8x10 enlarger, you know, which is, you know, which has to be screwed to the floor and the wall, because if it fell on you, it'd kill you. You know, it's so huge.
Seems like you got the bug straight away. You know, it's not like you had a period of like, oh, you know, photography is this interesting thing that I like. Maybe I'll come back to that one day. It hit you hard and you got the bug straight away, and then before you know, education and straight into work, and just to be working in the field of photography, regardless if it's advertising or whatever it was, and still have the passion to do your own work on top of that. It's inspiring.
Yeah, and I think also, I do think I was lucky though, because I think that, you know, it's difficult sometimes when you're younger to sort of think, what am I going to do? And I think I was very lucky to sort of feel that from the beginning, thinking, yeah, that's what I want to do. You know, I can feel that I'll be good at that. I think also, as my dad said to me, you know, you're not much good at anything else. So, you know, you might as well do that.
Yeah. That sounds like a classic dad sort of backhanded
mentality.
Yeah. So going back to the advertising, like it's great that you were able to start doing that, and you know, getting paid as a photographer, which I think is something that everyone wants to do now. So many people can pick up a camera quite easily and just it's a question we've been asked before, like, have you got any tips on how to become a professional photographer? And it's like, well, no, not really. Like, work hard. Work hard and luck, and you might, you know, have an opportunity. But it's such a saturated market, even more so. But who did you do work for? Is there anyone like that any work that you did that we would know of, or anyone that you worked with that we'd recognise?
I originally worked on still life photography. I photographed a lot of beer for Scottish and Newcastle breweries. So that's not
a bad thing, is it? Photography and beer.
No, I rather enjoyed it, really. It was quite good. So I did that for quite a while. And I worked for really good agencies that at the time, Collett Dickinson Pierce was like one of the best agencies. Abbott Mead Vickers, there's a lot, JWT, Saatchi and Saatchi. They were all very good agencies. And so I worked for most of those really over a long period of time. Wow. Then I changed into doing more location work, which was something I wanted to do. And a really, really nice art director that I'd worked with a lot gave me my first real big opportunity to work on Volkswagen cars on location, and so I did that, and some of that work won some awards and that sort of thing, and then it just sort of carried on. Really, I started doing more location. Then I got agents in America and Germany and Italy, and then between all of that, and England, but between all of them, I just sort of kept it all rolling, really, working on different things. So I would work on maybe Mercedes cars and Renault, and not just cars, but I mean, that was one of the main areas for location work. So
I suppose as a photographer, your willingness to be able to travel to these locations is a huge plus from the employer eye, like the employee's eye. But when you were actually on a shoot, do you have quite a lot of creative freedom, or is it very much directed and you're there to to take the photos, or yeah?
I think, I take your point. You often have quite a bit of creative freedom, but it's a sort of two-person thing, really. You've got the art director who's got the original idea, and you may be working from a drawing or whatever, or a sketch, whatever. And between you, you try to get the best result you can, really. But often it's quite a big crew of people. So you've got the photographer, maybe an assistant, maybe two assistants, a location manager, the people that deal with the car and cleaning it and delivering it and come as well. And sometimes one of the agency account people come. Usually we try to always keep clients away because they used to interfere too much. But if we had a client, we'd always have an account man with us so that he could sort of take him off somewhere and keep him away from the cameras and things.
Keep it close to net.
Yeah, exactly. But so most jobs were, quite a big production, really, because if you were leaving from England and shooting, say, I don't know, in Arizona or somewhere, you've got to get everybody over there. The photographer like me would be responsible for all those people. You'd fly over to Los Angeles and then from there go out to wherever you're going to shoot in the desert, and then do it all and then process. We used to usually process in Los Angeles for safety's sake, so that we'd get the film process there, with all transparency E6 processing. And then once we got all the film, give it all to the art director and we'd fly home. That was the general routine.
Did you know back then that it was, well, obviously it's hard, isn't it? Because photography has developed and evolved so much, especially in the kind of last 10 years, say. Not only with the cameras and, the equipment itself, but the kind of the freedom to be able to be a photographer and do those things that you want to do.
Yeah.
Do you look back at that and kind of cherish that a lot more, knowing how kind of special it was to have that experience?
Yeah, I think I do. Yeah, I think it was quite hard to do, and I think that in those days, people did realise that it was a lot of effort. I think probably it's still a lot of effort, actually, even now. Even with the digital, you can shoot so much more material. But I still think it's probably quite hard. Doing big jobs, I think, would be just as stressful as it was in my day, I would say. The great opportunity for me was that when I was ever in these other countries, I was often have a few extra days. For instance, like the landscapes I did in America were often done because I had some time off and I could just sort of travel and do those pictures for myself, mostly in black and white. And that, that was great, really, because I probably couldn't have ever afforded to take off so much time to just go off and do those pictures. Really, not at that time, because I was like running the studio. So I had myself to pay, as it were, and the assistants and the secretary and the location people and the building itself, So there's a lot of money involved in it all. And I suppose
there's the business side, isn't there? And then there's your own side. And, I appreciate some weeks, months, years will be busier than others, but just to hear that you still had the drive and the motivation to go out and take your own photos, which kind of leads me on to my next question. One of the questions I had is, from the shoots that you did and the work that you had to do, did you ever have the opportunity to do your own photos within those projects that weren't necessarily directed by anyone for you to do, with more like a passion project within the kind of work that you was doing? Yeah,
I did. It was always more difficult, though, when there's a lot of people around you and you can't really sort of say, okay, I want to do this project for myself, because in a way that they're paying you. It's a little tricky. So they often knew, but I never used to say too much about it. So I remember once when I was in Africa and we were shooting something for British Telecom. I mean, I know that sounds weird, British Telecom in Africa, but we were. And then I just sort of managed to squeeze in sort of 4 or 5 days and disappeared you know, somewhere else completely, using the car that I'd hired for them, for their work, and, you know, managed to squeeze a few hotel bills in against the job, and went off and did stuff. And that was a project that I did. But, you know, generally, you had to be a little bit careful of not for people to think that you're really taking the piss, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I thought, you know, you were going to say like 1 or 2 shots every now and again, but to get like get almost a
3 or 4 days.
Yeah, 3 or 4 days away isn't bad, really.
Yeah.
No, definitely not. I feel like we could all use that kind of escape from time to time, couldn't we? But I mean, that's amazing just to hear some of the jobs. And, you know, I suppose from, you know, myself and Luke, we're not professional photographers. You know, we both had our experience with kind of different works and, you know, within photography, but especially hearing it from a time that was, you know, 20, 30 years ago, it's really inspirational. And what is it you do now?
Now I work on my own black and white work.
It's all your own work.
I'm still shooting stuff, or landscapes and all sorts of things. I started off doing some nudes in Chelsea in the studio years and years ago. I then printed those up, and some of those sold well, and so I thought, okay, so I started off on another project of it. But I wanted to sort of try and get the same sort of feel into the lighting and everything, and that's quite difficult because the original nudes were done in a daylight studio, which was my studio, and I decided what I'd do is I was working on these in Spain because that's where this darkroom place is of mine, and I decided what I'd do is work with on a sort of bright day but a dull day, but outside, and so I got a big background made up, which I could spread out on the ground, and then I could get the model on that, and then work with the available daylight. And it wouldn't work with strong sunlight; it would look awful. But with a sort of cloudy, overcast day, I managed to create the same sort of feel that I had from, like, you know, 30 years earlier. And so that's what I've been working on. It's
pretty good, because I always think it's quite, you know, we all have kind of people that we enjoy seeing their work, you know, big names, small names, wherever it might be. And sometimes you feel influenced to go out and take photos like them to kind of practice, you know, the art of photography, as cheesy as that sounds. Yeah. And it's so hard to replicate the work of someone else. But it's quite interesting listening to you say you're trying to replicate your own work years later, and that's still a challenge. Do you know what I mean? Because
it was a challenge, actually. To begin with, it wasn't working too well at all. It really wasn't. And I was thinking, I don't know what I'm doing wrong here, because, like, I did this so long ago. But eventually I got the feel right, and I don't know what it was. It was like I was using some, I mean, it sounds crazy, but I was using some quite a long time, and somehow that started to look really good, and I just thought, wow, this is working now. So I pressed on with that. Luckily, I had quite a lot of it, so, you know, I've still got some of it. So I've been sort of working in that. But obviously, with the lockdown, that, you know, created obviously problems for the whole world. So at the time of the first lockdown, I was in Spain, because I used to go out there in late March or early March, and then work for a month or two, and then come home. But this, obviously, the lockdown happened while I was in Spain, and the borders closed and everything. I couldn't go anywhere. And so I used the time printing work and things like that, which was fine, until basically I ran out of materials, literally ran out of printing paper, couldn't get any more from anywhere. And that was it. That was my lockdown. So I then went out on the mountains with my 5.4 camera and did some pictures, even though I wasn't even meant to go out. But, you know, after a few days in there on your own, I just thought, I've got to get out, you know. Yeah. So I just packed up my rucksack, put in my 5.4 camera and some film, and just went off wandering and taking a few pictures.
Nice.
When it comes to photography, are you kind of quite trigger happy, or do you spend a long time kind of looking around you before you take a photo?
I tend to sort of try and sort of imagine what I want. When I see a subject, I think, right, okay, I've got to try and imagine what this looks like on the actual print itself. So I sort of try and do that. And then I set the camera up. So I'm not particularly quick, but I set the camera up slowly and get it all how I want it. And then I tend to sort of meter it up slowly. And then I just shoot usually just 4 sheets of film, all the same exposure. And then I take those back to the darkroom and I just process one first and have a look at it. And then if I need to adjust it, I can sort of adjust the sort of loads of experience and years of doing it. I'm usually more or less right, you know. So that's how I work. I very rarely shoot more than that, on any one subject.
Yeah. That's a really interesting way of doing it. Like just taking 4 shots of the same exposure. Because you know, if I do the same shot over and over again, then I'm like adjusting it every single time. Like, oh, what if it's sort of underexposed a stop or over a stop? And usually, you know, doesn't make that much difference anyway. But that's really interesting. Yeah, with that type of film, to be able to just do it and then make adjustments in the developing stage.
I think there's a video that I watched recently where you might develop. So, you know, you've taken your 4 photos and you said you develop one. But sometimes you can develop it in, you know, that one photo. So you can do 5 different exposures as you're printing all on one sheet. And then you can kind of look at that and go, oh yeah. That's like the one that I want to expose the whole photo.
Yeah. That's like a control sheet, which I do. Yeah. I do when I'm printing, definitely. Yeah. But
and is it just a feeling that it comes to? So you're like, yeah, that's the look I'm going for. That's what I envisioned when I took the picture. And that's, you know, I'm happy with that result. Or can you spend a lot of time printing it and then you're like, kind of wish I would have done the other one now?
Yeah, I mean, that can happen, definitely. I mean, because printing is like a real art in itself, as far as I'm concerned. Like, there's so many things can go wrong when you're making a print. Particularly, I mean, just so many things can go wrong. So whenever I'm making a print, which is like for sale or something like that, I always make 3 of the same, or 3 or 4, and try and get them identical as I can. And then, because things can happen, like in the wash tank, you know, you can get a print creased, or you can get a mark on it, or when it dries, it wrinkles on the edge or something like that, and you can't press it out. Or when you're spotting the print at the end, you know, you've only got to make a couple of wrong spotting marks and it's like ruined. So you just do that, and it's time consuming, you know, but it's really enjoyable to just sort of work with the chemicals and everything. It's a nice sort of feeling when you get that print in the wash and you think, cracked it, I've got it right. It's taking like a few hours, but I've got it exactly as I want it. It's got a nice feeling, and then you think, right, okay, I've got it. I've got to do 3 more to match it now, just in case anything happens to them. So that's sort of how I work, really. You know,
I think that goes back to what you like, what I said about, you know, the nostalgia and going back and appreciating the times that you had in studios and working with products and stuff. And it's the same for me. Like at college, I spent the best part of 2 years in the darkroom, and then didn't really appreciate it until now later in life, I realised how valuable that time was that I had in the darkroom. And I would love that, you know, I'd love to have that available to me, you know, on any given day. And, you know, Luke, you develop your own film, don't you?
Getting into developing it was, it felt like a big step, but then when I did it, it was like, oh, it's not actually that hard. But going from that to actually making my own prints, I haven't taken that leap yet. And I feel like that's definitely a bigger kind of step up. But it is something I really...
That's my one regret, is that the prints that I did when I was at college, for the life of me, I don't know where they are. I definitely won't have thrown them away, but they must be in my parents' attic or something like that. I haven't got a clue, but I mean, they'll probably just some, like, you know, when you go to college, you make a pinhole camera out of a shoebox or whatever it is, but I still would like to have those prints.
Yeah.
I haven't got a clue.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I lost a lot of stuff that I did very early on. That was at college time, that I lost a lot of it, you know. But it's in fact, there's only one. I think the image is in the file, and it's the only image I've got from that I took when I was a student, and that's the only one that's sort of survived, really. What's quite interesting about that is that that the feel of some of my other work later does have has a look of that. That there is definitely, I mean, I can see it now looking back on it, that there was a bit of a style starting then as to how I worked, and how later, you know, my work progressed. But it's, you know, I can see that was where the starting point was, the way that I'd used available light then and how I used available light going forwards, you know, throughout my career, really.
Constantly learning and evolving your own skills.
Yeah, I just got better at it, but I can see it, you know, looking back on the work, that's how it sort of started off.
It's interesting when you see that stuff that you did like early on when you first started out, and you were doing something that's kind of maybe technically good, but you don't realise you're doing it, or you're
exactly.
It's really interesting to look back on it and go, oh, I was doing, you know, using the available natural light there to light my subject. But at the time, it just seemed like an obvious thing to do, maybe. But
and that's also, I probably couldn't afford any lighting equipment, you know, when it comes down to it. That's probably why I was using available light. Literally, I probably couldn't. You know, but I mean, I didn't get into using until I started being a commercial photographer. Well, when I was assisting, then obviously I learned how to use all the sort of proper big electronic flash and stuff like that. But then whenever I use that for more of my personal work, I always tried to still make it look a bit like it was just daylight, if you know what I mean. I never really wanted my own work to have a commercial look to it, you know. That was the furthest thing from my mind, really. I wanted it to just look sort of.
You know, we've been talking for some time now, and I often look at, you know, the work that you post and share and stuff like that. And what really stands out to me is some of the portraits you take. To me, they're just, I don't know. You know, you've had a lot of years' experience, but at the same time, you still can't teach someone to naturally frame a photo, I don't think. And you definitely have a certain eye to look at things in a way that you know, people obviously enjoy, which is great.
No, thank you. That's very nice. That's a lovely comment. I mean, I think you're right. You know, at the end of the day, I think you either just have a little bit of an eye for something and you just naturally can do it. It's not, you're right. I mean, it's not something you can actually learn. It's just, you either can do it or not, you know. I think that's the thing.
You can learn all you want about cameras, films, or you know, whatever equipment. You can be the best assistant in the world, but you know, you do have to have a natural, you know, a natural eye for it, so to speak. And I think you know, not to say that there isn't many people that do that. There are hundreds of people that have that eye, and you know, thousands, millions even. And you know, we see it. You know, we see it all day when we see people that are, you know, tagging us, and we see people's work, and it really is inspiring. But I think what comes across the most in your work and also other people's is that it's clearly a passion, and that passion comes across. You know, it's not like you've gone, oh, this will make a nice, pretty picture. It's no, this is what you kind of go behind that photograph and you go, well, why did Chris want to take that photo? There's a message behind that. And if you look at a photo for more than a couple of seconds, you're going to look at it for, you know, a long time. And, you know, every time I see your work, I'm stopping and I'm kind of studying to not only learn, but also think, oh yeah, I can see, well, I think I can see what you're trying to portray there.
You know, I think one of my favourite portraits was there's a portrait from the Cuban series, which is a farmer stood with like a scythe on his shoulder, and it's one of my favourites, and it was quite difficult to do. It really was, and he sort of cooperated, but I could see it. Like the moment I got out of the car near where he was, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and you know, it took time to set the 5.4 camera up and everything else, and he just was very patient. But then when I was ready to shoot, somehow he just got into the position naturally. He just did it, you know. I didn't have to direct him or anything. He just did it, and I just shot 4 sheets of film really quickly and thought, that's a winner. I just knew it, you know, when I did it. And I just thought, as long as that film gonna be okay for me to get it from Cuba back to London with nothing happening to it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it was definitely that. Yeah.
One of the questions I had for you, Chris, is it strictly film photography, or have you evolved into taking digital photography, or is it just film itself?
I do use digital, but it's more for I use it for like recording bits and pieces that I'm interested in, which I'm then later going to go and do with film. I do get some digital prints made. For instance, the 2 pictures that are from America that I sent, which is the fire truck and the pool room. Both of those prints are quite large. They're about a meter wide, and they're digitally printed. But from that's about it really, as far as digital photography goes for me. It's not that I'm not interested in it. I am, but it's just not what works for me for my sales or anything, because people. A lot of the people that are interested in buying the photography really like the gelatine silver prints.
Yeah,
that's not to say that they don't like digital prints. I mean, they do, but for me, that's sort of what I'm known for doing. So I really just sort of stick with that. And I do, as I say, I do use digital photography I use it for recording all sorts of ideas and things like that. But
we had this conversation yesterday because, you know, but I've recently picked up a new digital camera, and you know, but it works just like an analog camera. And it begs the question, like, why shoot film if I can experience an analog camera, but I don't have to go and develop? But you just can't beat the look of a film, like a film photo. Do you know what I mean? You know the difference. Like, you can tell the difference almost straight away. I think anyway, but. You know, it's more natural, isn't it?
When you're shooting on digital, even though like a camera like that Fuji, it looks like an analog camera, it just, you still know that you can take as many shots as you want and you don't think about it as much.
Yeah.
So like I'm always like, oh, what, after I've been using it for a while, I'm like, what's the point of shooting on film? And then as soon as I pick up my film camera again, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember.
For me, coming from a background of not so much the advertising, because within advertising, I could usually shoot as much film as I wanted because it was obviously being paid for by somebody. Yeah. But when I was doing my own work, you know, you do tend to think, you know, film's expensive. At least don't go mad with it. Do you know what I mean? So I suppose I've become much more restricted in the sense of not shooting a lot of film. Like I said, you know, about the 4 sheets of 5.4, you know, or if I was working on roll film, you know, I'd probably maybe just do a roll or something, but I wouldn't be going mad, like sort of shooting loads. And certainly when I do occasionally use 10x8 camera, that film is really expensive then. So I tend to be very careful with that.
I suppose you've got to do all the waves, and especially the wave that's high now of film prices definitely rocketing in every sense of the word. You know, cameras, films, the equipment, everything.
No, I've noticed that. Yeah, it's true. I mean, the prices have risen sharply. I mean, I'm quite lucky really, because I sort of have a little bit of a deal with Ilford, because sometimes they use some of my pictures and
did we tell you how much we like you, Chris? Did we tell you that? That's great. I mean, if you've got a little in, then that's perfect, isn't it? It makes life a little bit easier. Well, you'll have to send us the contact details.
I should really. No, she's a really nice person there, actually, but she's great.
yeah, that is great. I mean, especially supporting something like that, and if you know you get on with the film stock, you find what you like, and then we were talking about it recently. Like Luke, you were saying that you're what was it HP5 that you're going to try and shoot for the year? I know, sorry.
Delta.
That's it.
Yeah, it's like Ilford Delta, like
Delta. Yeah.
I shot like it for the first time and was just like, right, that's it. That's all I want to use now. So for like the next year, that's all I'm going to shoot with when I'm shooting black and white anyway.
Yeah, no, it's a nice film. Well, I usually use HP5 or FP4, basically just because that's what I've always used, because it sort of corresponds quite nicely the same as Tri-X and Plus X, which is what I used quite a lot. But Plus X has been discontinued now. It works quite well for me with Ilford. I'm quite happy with their stuff. It works quite well for my type of work. So yeah, that's what I stick to at the minute.
Well, I was going to say that leads quite nicely into a question we're going to ask everybody that we speak to over the next few weeks. Well, everyone who shoots on film anyway. It's kind of like I don't know what to call it. Desert island analog, desert island something or other. So if you had one camera, one lens, and one film, what would you pick?
And on this island, by the way, is everything you'd ever want to shoot. Not nothing. It's an island with everything you want to shoot, but you can only take one camera, one lens, one film stock.
Right. Okay. So it's got to be my trusty wooden Gandolfi 5.4 with a 150mm lens, which is more or less standard, so it will work on most things. And the film stock would be Tri-X, I think, or HP5. Well, either, whichever I could have.
Yeah.
And that would be what I'd work with. Yeah.
I guarantee you'll be the only person who picks that, and I like that.
Yeah, I know. There's not going to be a lot of people who pick that. No.
Yeah. And have you got any kind of tips or advice for anyone trying to get into, not necessarily large format or anything like that, but anyone that's getting into photography, into film photography?
Well, I think getting into film camera, if it was me, I would try and buy first off a fairly simple 35mm camera, which you can get from a lot of photographic shops, or there's loads of photographic auctions where they're selling off a lot of that equipment, and that's where you would get it at a pretty good price. And I'd start off with that, and if you sort of felt, yeah, that's working quite well, then I'd probably try and get hold of a 2 1/4 square camera, for 120 film. I don't know. There's lots of them on the market, that work quite well. Even a twin lens reflex camera, they're fine, It's really, really good pictures with them. There's no reason why not. Because things like Hasselblads and Bronicas and those sort of cameras, the prices of those have really risen. And probably for most people, it's quite a big investment, that.
What Hasselblad have you? You've got the Hasselblad 500 CM, is that right?
Yeah, that's what I've got.
Yeah, and the only reason I know that so well is one of our friends, Tom. He shoots the same camera, and it's beautiful. I mean, it looks visually great as a camera, and it takes fantastic pictures as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, that would be something that I would definitely recommend. I mean, but as I say, that price-wise is they're pretty pricey, to be honest. I mean, I've had that CM for forever, I've literally forever. It's been around the world a couple of times, at least. So it's well used, but I mean, it's still perfect. Yeah, I use the Hasselblad quite a lot for the reasons of sometimes I just don't feel like going out with the weight of the Gandolfi and all the bits that go with it, So I just I take a billet bag with just the Hasselblad in it and a few rolls of film and a meter, and that's it, nothing else.
Yeah.
And I do use it for portraits, for lots of portraits. I've not used it so much. I have used it for some of the nudes, but mostly on the nudes, because I work quite slowly and precisely. I tend to like to do that on on the 5.4 camera, so I can exactly see what I'm getting.
Yeah.
So that's just a way of working, really.
I feel like what I'm trying to do more at the moment, it's easier said than done, is if I go out to shoot some photos, whether it be for something that me and Luke are working on, or whether it's just going for a walk, you know, with my girlfriend and my dog, or whatever it might be, friends, I'm trying to only take one camera.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to do that, because you go, this would look good with this camera or this lens, or this would look good with this camera and this lens.
Yeah.
And if I've got I was carrying around a point and shoot, a digital point and shoot, 35mm camera, and then if I could be bothered to carry it around, I was walking around with my medium format camera as well, just so I had all kind of bases covered. But really, I should just go out with one camera and make that work for any situation. And if something's that memorable, I can always go back. Do you know what I mean? I can always go back to that location.
Yeah, absolutely. And often, sometimes that's a really good idea, you know, because if you see something and you think, right, that's really good, and you do it, and then you think, maybe I'll just go back and have a look at it again, you know, from a different perspective or whatever. That can be very useful. You know, it can be good to do that.
Especially if you're waiting for the weather to change. You know,
and the
weather. I often come across a really nice location. I go, bit too sunny, or it's raining, but this would look great if it was sunny. Do you know what I mean? Or whatever the situation is. Or that would be great if someone was walking past, but I'm the only one here. But you know, it's just part of it, part of the fun, isn't it? Part of the adventure.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. And you know, there's days when it just doesn't work, you know, and there's also days when you just can't think what you want to do. You know, I mean, it happens, you know, often.
I'd say that's kind of Monday to Sunday for me, and then I sometimes get a peek.
Absolutely, yeah. You're dead right there.
I just got an eye on the time. We were going to talk about photographers as well, weren't we? Like influences.
Yeah. Influences, I would say, are, I mean, there's some of most of the American photographers, the older American photographers, like, I suppose, there's a lady called Laura Gilpin that I really like her work. There's quite a few. I mean, obviously there's like the Ansel Adams for the landscapes. Edward Weston was one of my real favorites. I mean, I love his day diaries. There's a few pictures in it, but it's most so interesting as to how he managed his life, and that's great. The other American photographers I like Minor White is another one that I really like. His Paul Strand. All those sort of people, I think, had influence on me. I mean, I never tried to like think, right, I must copy them or do that sort of thing, because I mean, that is really not the way to do it. But they influence you in the sense of just their achievement, you know, and you just think, wow, you know.
Sometimes you can appreciate a body of work, even if it's so far-fetched to what you like yourself. But I look at it all day, and I'm like, that I would never dream of. You know, it doesn't really bother me to take a photo like that. Or sometimes past photography. Yeah. Sometimes I watch something, I'm like, I've got no interest in that, but I can appreciate it. I can really appreciate the work that's gone into it, which makes me subconsciously like it, and I like it more and more and more. You know, like the artwork and photos that I've got up on my wall around my house. They're not photos that I would take, but I like them because I like the photographer who's took them, because their kind of work speaks to me, or I like it because it's something different to what I would produce.
No, I totally agree. I mean, in my house here, I've got like one picture of mine up on the wall, but the rest of the pictures that are on the walls, they're or whatever, which is just nice, because I just like the idea of things that I've thought, yeah, that is really good, you know. I wish I'd done it, you know.
Yeah.
So, but that's a good thing, when you think, I wish I'd done it. You know, that's a good thing. I also just say that as regards sort of colour work, in a way, and not just colour, but I think like artists I mean, Edward Hopper is somebody that work to me is just brilliant, and that influenced me from an early stage. I went to an exhibition he had in London a long time ago, but it was seeing those images and the way he got the light to work on people's faces and the buildings and all of it. I just thought, wow, this guy is just brilliant. And that definitely gave me a feel for how I wanted to sort of almost make photography work, really, in my own colour pictures anyway.
I actually picked up an Edward Hopper book, I don't know, maybe about a year ago. That's what I was actually just looking for then, but it's not on my desk. But yeah, I can appreciate an artist. Like, I get a lot of inspiration from artists as well, which, yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because to appreciate a piece of artwork and then want to, it motivates you to go out and take your own, your own pictures in your own style, doesn't it? Doesn't necessarily have to be a photograph.
No, I agree totally. It does. It just gives you that, like, wow, I can see what he's doing there, and it just gives you that, right, I'm going to go out, not do what he's doing, but just utilize that information that's just in your head from seeing him off, and just do something yourself. I mean, that's how it worked with me anyway. That was the thing about it. The Cuban series, there's an image of a church, and it's quite an interesting story because I turned up at that church quite early morning, and there's nobody about, nobody at all. And I set up the tripod with the 5.4 Gandolfi on it, and started to get it focused and all that sort of stuff. And then suddenly I looked round, and there was like loads of children, loads of them, and they were all standing watching me and shouting, England, Manchester United, England, Manchester United. And I was thinking, oh my God. And so one by one, they all came and stood on a box and looked in the back of the Gandolfi with a cloth over their head. And they were just amazed. The church was upside down, of course, because it would be. But they just loved it. It was like street theatre. I didn't speak hardly any Spanish, and they didn't speak an awful lot of English other than Manchester United, so but we got on brilliantly.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, I was just about to say, like, sometimes you can look back at an image like that,
yeah, and
I might look at that photo not knowing anything about it, and I can go, oh, that's an amazing photo, I can see the passion, I think it's a great picture. But you look at it and you might not necessarily look at the subject, you're thinking about that time that you're taking that picture, yeah, which is why photography is so unique, I think, in a lot of ways. One picture can say 1,000 words. Again, cliche and a bit cheesy, but
it's interesting, isn't it? Really, I mean, within that series, there's the Cuban fisherman who, again, early morning, I saw this man just standing on a rock with a crossbow, and I thought, what the hell is he doing? Why would you stand on a rock with a crossbow? And I thought, I hope he doesn't pointed at me. And then I wandered over to him and established that he was fishing, which is very interesting, really, that you stand in early morning and just fire a crossbow at fish. But I just had to photograph him because I just thought, this is so bizarre. I'm not going to see this anywhere else in the world. Somebody standing with a crossbow.
And what are people like when you tend to take a photo of them? Do they tend to respond quite positively? Or?
Yeah, most people respond. I've very rarely had anybody say go away or anything like that. Most people are quite interested. Particularly different countries, they're usually quite interested because they instantly pick in, and then they're usually quite interested, what you're doing here, why have you come? Wow, what a funny camera, when you get out a wooden thing and start screwing it together. Do you know what I mean? So that usually breaks the ice completely, because they know straight away that you're odd to start with. What are you doing here with this wooden camera and a dark cloth and screwing a tripod and putting the camera on the top of it and all that sort of stuff? So that always broke the ice of you're going to take a picture of them. They go, yeah, okay, yeah, fine, and that's sort of how it's worked, really. But I've had an odd person say, no, I don't want a picture taken, but that minimal, very minimal.
Well, that photo of the fisherman, that was actually I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was the first one that I think we reached out to you about, and I was like,
it probably was, yeah, you did, yeah.
So I remember us having a little chat about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was just like that. I was blown away.
And also the one of there's another one of the guy stood in a doorway, which is quite nice. I mean, that's another Cuban farmer. I like the one with the other guy with the scythe on his shoulder better, but even the one in the doorway is quite a nice picture. And the other guy that sat in the rocking chair, I mean, he's really interesting. He was very old man, and he'd been shot in the eye. He was really happy about having his photo taken. And then through some bit of translation and a bit of that, we found out that he'd been shot when he was in the forces with Fidel Castro and Che Guevara that was in the 60s. But he was still alive when I was there taking that photograph of him, and he was happy as Larry to have his photo taken and to try and relate the story, you know, of and he was very proud that, you know, he'd been in the Revolutionary Army, you know, and rightly so, you know, a great guy, you know, fantastic person.
When I see one of your photos, when I'm scrolling through Instagram, I'm now at the point where I know it's one of your photos, and then I say to myself, and then I go, what year is this? Is it current, or is it 90s, or is it early 2000s?
Yeah,
and that's my guess.
I'm so old, it could be. It could be.
But do you know what I mean? Like, I get to the point where I'm like, this one. The other day you posted one, I think from 1990, and I generally couldn't tell if it was taken recently. And then I read it, and I was like, I don't know, whatever camera you use, Leica M3, blah, 1990. And I was like, okay, yeah. But now it's kind of turned into this little guessing game with myself.
Well, because I sent something into. It was a sale actually. I was selling something, and it was a nude, and some of these nudes had been from like 1990 and onwards and whatever, but there was one that I'd done in like 1982, right, which is a long time ago, and I'd sent it in and I typed it out, you know, date of picture 1982. And when they sort of started to do the catalogue, they just thought, which is nice, because they thought, I can't be 82 because he can't have been that old then. Do you know what I mean? He couldn't have taken it then. So they put 1992. And then when they sent back the copy, I sort of rang up and I just said, no, that was 82.
Yeah.
And they went, oh, bloody hell.
That's great. That's good. Chris, thanks for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
No, I've really enjoyed it. It's been really nice chatting to you. I mean,
I really appreciate it.
Really good. Cheers. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.